Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Israel's banning more than 24 international humanitarian groups, including Doctors Without Borders, MSF, Oxfam, and the Norwegian Refugee Council from operating in the Gaza Strip starting New Year's Day. Israeli authorities say the organizations did not meet new registration requirements that include sharing detailed information about staff, funding, and operations. We'll speak with the Norwegian Refugee Council after headlines. Israel continues to claim without evidence that Hamas is infiltrating the distribution of aid, a charge the aid groups have repeatedly denied. The announcement drastically harms Gaza's residents who rely heavily on the aid groups for medical care, food, and shelter. For instance, MSF is responsible for 20% of the hospital beds and supports a third of all births in Gaza. In a statement issued last week in anticipation of Israel's announcement, MSF said, quote, if Israeli authorities revoke MSF's access to Gaza in 2026, a large portion of people in Gaza will lose access to critical medical care, water, and life-saving support. MSF's activities serve nearly 500,000 people in Gaza through our vital support to the destroyed health system, they said. Meanwhile, the Pentagon awarded Boeing an $8.6 billion contract to build and deliver 25 new F-15 fighter jets for the Israeli Air Force. The announcement comes after President Trump met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at Mar-a-Lago, the U.S.'s largest supplier of arms to Israel. Saudi Arabia carried out strikes in Yemen's port city of Mukalla Tuesday after accusing the United Arab Emirates of sending a shipment of weapons and combat vehicles to separatist forces known as the Southern Transitional Council. Shortly after the strikes, the UAE announced it's withdrawing its remaining troops in Yemen. The Southern Transitional Council initially supported Yemen's internationally recognized government against the Houthi rebels, but earlier this month, the separatist forces launched an offensive against the Saudi Arabia-backed government troops. Russia launched an overnight drone attack on the Ukrainian port city of Odessa, injuring 4 people, including 3 children. The strike comes as Russia claims to have moved a nuclear-capable missile system into Belarus a day after Russia accused Ukraine of carrying out a drone attack on Russian President Vladimir Putin's residence. Russian officials doubled down on the claim on Tuesday, but refused to provide any evidence. Meanwhile, national security advisors from several European countries are set to meet in Ukraine on Saturday, according to the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Speaking to reporters, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk said a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine could be reached within weeks.
The key outcome of recent days is the American declaration, and this is, of course, something new. Some were even surprised. The American declaration of the United States' readiness to participate in security guarantees for Ukraine after the conclusion of peace, including the presence of American troops, for example, on the border or on the line of contact between Ukraine and Russia.
In Iran, mass protests over the country's dire economic situation, including a collapsing currency and high inflation, have spread from businesses to universities. According to social media posts, students protested Tuesday at 6 university campuses in the capital, Tehran, and as well in Isfahan and Yazd. The post showed students chanting freedom and don't be afraid, we are all together. Clashes broke out between students and security forces near the University of Tehran. This comes as Iran responded to President Trump's threats that he would support new strikes against the country over its nuclear program. On social media, Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian warned that any actions against Iran would be, quote, severe and regret-inducing, unquote. This is the head of Iran's parliament Tuesday.
I emphasize that Iran does not seek permission from anyone to defend itself. The Iranian people's response to any widespread adventurism and evil is unapologetic and even unexpected.
At least 2 oil tankers have reportedly arrived in Venezuela in recent days, with other vessels navigating toward the Venezuelan coast despite the Trump administration's blockade. The 2 other tankers approaching Venezuela are not under sanctions and are part of a fleet from China. It's unclear whether China will press the Trump administration to secure the safe passage of the vessels as the U.S. ramps up its military forces against Venezuela. This comes as the New York Times investigations offered a glimpse into the physical evidence following mounting U.S. military strikes on boats off the Caribbean. The Times reports days after a U.S. boat strike in November, a scorched 30-foot-long boat washed ashore a Colombian peninsula, followed by 2 bodies and dozens of packets, some of which had traces of a substance that smelled and looked like marijuana. The damning new details contradict President Trump's claims of targeting cocaine and fentanyl traffickers. Marijuana is legal in at least 40 U.S. states. The U.S. Treasury sanctioned 10 people and firms from Iran and Venezuela over allegedly supporting Iran's drone trade and ballistics program. It follows President Trump's announcement of a maximum pressure campaign against Iran over its nuclear program earlier this year, which led to U.S. strikes against 3 nuclear enrichment facilities in Iran over the summer. Iran continued to claim its nuclear program is peaceful and for civilian purposes. In Bolivia, protests led by miners have entered a second week, with police forces on Tuesday firing tear gas at demonstrators in the capital, La Paz. Protesters have condemned new austerity measures issued by the government of President Rodrigo Paz Pereira, who took office in early November. The decree has doubled gasoline prices and tripled diesel costs, with labor leaders and workers saying the new reforms will also skyrocket food and transportation costs for communities living in poverty. This is one of the protesters.
We've been repressed with rubber bullets, with weapons. We are fighting for a just cause. It is for Bolivia. We will fight to the end until we get this cursed decree repealed.
Honduran presidential runner-up Salvador Nasrallah has formally filed an appeal to challenge the results of last month's contested Honduran election. There are mounting accusations of fraud after the conservative Nasri Asfoda was declared the winner nearly a month after voters took to the polls in an electoral process that was riddled with technical issues and a lack of transparency. Asfoda was personally endorsed by President Trump, which was widely criticized as a way to intervene in Honduras's election. Nasrallah lost to Asfoda by less than 1% of the vote and is seeking a review and recount of voter ballots. The state of Florida executed 19 people on death row this year, a record high that nearly doubled the national average. That's according to the Death Penalty Information Center, which said Florida's executions accounted for about 40% of the country's total this year. Advocates calling to abolish the death penalty have warned many of those put to death suffered from mental illness or were not given access to proper legal representation. Others were victims of abuse. Florida's Republican Governor Ron DeSantis has been accused of expediting executions for political gain. Unlike other states where the courts are more steadily involved in the process, Florida's governor has the sole authority to issue execution warrants. A newly unsealed order in the criminal case against Kilmar Abrego Garcia revealed Justice Department officials pushed for his indictment, calling it a top priority after he was wrongfully sent to El Salvador's mega prison, Secat, then returned to the U.S. under court order. Meanwhile, ICE says it will not rearrest him again as long as a federal judge's order blocking his detention remains in place. The Justice Department brought human smuggling charges against him for driving in a car with other undocumented immigrants. Kilmar Abrego Garcia is seeking to dismiss his case on the grounds the Trump administration is targeting him. A federal judge has temporarily blocked the Trump administration from ending deportation protections for 230 immigrants from South Sudan. The decision by Judge Angel Kelly came about a week before their TPS, temporary protected status, was set to expire, citing in the ruling, quote, serious long-term consequences, including the risk of deadly harm if the immigrants are deported to South Sudan. The United Nations has warned of escalating armed conflict in South Sudan and widespread food insecurity in the region. The Trump administration announced it's freezing all child care funds to Minnesota. The Deputy Secretary of Health and Human Services, Jim O'Neill, said the move was in response to the work of right-wing anti-Muslim influencer Nick Shirley, who published a video claiming he found that daycare centers operated by Somali residents in Minneapolis had committed fraud. Shirley's video provided scant evidence of his claims, but was retweeted by Vice President J.D. Vance and Elon Musk. And at midnight New York time, Democratic Socialist Zohran Mamdani will be sworn in as mayor of New York City by New York Attorney General Letitia James in a private ceremony at an abandoned subway station under City Hall. Then, on New Year's Day, Vermont's independent Senator Bernie Sanders will publicly administer the oath of office to Mamdani on the steps of City Hall. Democratic Congressmember Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez will introduce Mamdani in the midst of an inauguration block party, which is expected to have some 40,000 revelers. Democracy Now! Will be streaming the inauguration ceremony at democracynow.org. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman in New York, joined by Democracy Now!'s Juan Gonzalez in Chicago. Hi, Juan.
Hi, Amy, and welcome to all of our listeners and viewers across the country and around the world.
Thanks for watching Democracy Now! On YouTube. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to make sure you never miss a video. And for more of our audience-supported journalism, go to democracynow.org, where you can download our news app, sign up for our newsletter, subscribe to the daily podcast, and so much more.